I think I'm going to preface this by saying, when my family received the diagnosis that my mom has FTD at the age of 56 and that there is no treatment and that there is no cure, I'm my mother's daughter. And if you ever told her that something was unattainable, or if you ever told her no, she would fight until there was a yes. I mean, the apple did not fall far from the tree. And when we heard the words that there's nothing that we can do, my inner mom, right, sparked. And I said, well, that's not good enough. We're going to fight. So ever since then, I've been fighting. And with a disease like FTD, families are forced into making very difficult decisions all the time as the disease pivots and changes and as it progresses and people with this disease decline, there are lots of really difficult decisions that need to be made. Quite frankly, medical professionals were not the helpful ones in making these kinds of informed decisions. I created my Instagram platform just about 3.5, 4 months after my mom was diagnosed. That's when I said, okay, there's this disease out there and no one knows about it, so we're going to document it. And it was only when I started documenting it and talking about FTD on a public platform did I connect with other men and women around the same age as myself who are dealing with this disease. And through conversations with them and those who are already on the other side of the disease, did I learn the decisions that I personally might have to make as we navigate the course.
Give me an example of one of those decision points.
We can talk about genetic testing. I think that that's a biggie, especially in the world that I live in. When we got the diagnosis of FTD, not a single person told my family that there are some genetic causes for this disease, and not all of them are sporadic. We had originally thought this is a sporadic case since there was no history of dementia or any neurological disease or issue in my whole family. And it was only when I was digging and having these conversations with people did I learn that there might be some sort of a genetic component to it. And when I learned about that, that's when we brought it up to the medical professionals that were handling my mom's case, saying, hey, is it possible that her disease is genetic? So that's kind of how it all started. And that's probably to date the most important decision that we as a family have made so far. Us, because
I
prior to my grandparents, we were not able to trace family history and lineage that much. My mother is an Eastern European Jew from Ukraine, as are her parents, as are her grandparents. And prior to my grandparents' generation, almost everybody perished in the Holocaust. So therefore, we had no stories to pass down. We discovered that my mom carries the progranulin mutation. And I remember being on the Zoom call with the genetic counselor who administered the test, and they were dumbfounded. They had no idea how this was possible. And you can tell that they were scrambling for answers because now at least my family had an answer for why this was happening to my mom. But scientifically, we had no reason as to why or how. Naturally, when my mom came back positive for the progranulin mutation, the only logical next step would be to test her parents. I find that we were very fortunate because oftentimes when someone is diagnosed with FTD, their parents are no longer around, but my mom's parents were. So we tested my grandmother and we tested my grandfather. And a few weeks later, we get the results back that my grandfather, who was 82 or 83 years old, carries the progranulin mutation. And once again, we are all stuck on a Zoom with the genetic counselor and the medical team now, and they are dumbfounded as to how is it that he can live such a long life without ever exhibiting a single symptom of FTD? And my mom is ill. And then one day we get either a call or an email saying we might have a hypothesis as to why your grandfather carries the progranulin mutation and never got FTD. This was 2021. I think science looks a little bit different now in 2025 as we're recording this, but we only knew what we knew at the time, and it wasn't much. But the team of doctors and researchers said there might be this other gene out there called TMEM106B. It's a mouthful. We'll call it TMEM for short. And if he carries one or two alleles of it, he might inconclusively might be protected from ever getting FTD if he carries the progranulin mutation. Sure enough, we did another genetic test on my grandfather for now this TMEM gene, and he came back positive for carrying not one, but two alleles of it, which helped further the hypothesis that he could have been shielded from FTD. We then administered the genetic test for TMEM for my mom, and she carried zero alleles of it, which would explain potentially why she got sick with the same mutation as my grandfather, but he never did. This created a domino effect of genetic testing in my family. I am almost positive I was the first one to raise my hand and be like, okay, pick me, I'm next. And my reasons personally were for family planning. Because if I carried this gene, which now I understood I was at a 50% risk of inheriting upon my own conception, I would want to know because I don't want to pass it down if I do carry it. And I would like to know what my options are for family planning. So I went through 2 rounds of genetic counseling with my then boyfriend, now husband, and we talked it all through and decided that this was the best decision for my life, for our future. And I went forward with a genetic test, which thankfully came back negative. I cannot say the same for other people in my family. I have siblings, my mother has siblings. We've had positive cases of being progranulin carriers. We've had negative cases of being progranulin carriers. And now, because we know to test for something else, we've had instances where people do carry one or two alleles of TMAM 106B and instances where people carry the progranulin mutation and don't have any TMAM 106B. And I think, not to speak for other people in my family because it is a very personal subject to raise, but I think it helps others make informed decisions on their lives. For example, say I were to come back positive for being a carrier of this gene. Number one, I would likely explore IVF as a method of having children where you can then test the embryos for this mutation. And number two, I could then explore clinical trials and studies to enroll in for myself in the future.